Fantastic. Okay, I love starting with this photograph because it's one of the few photographs that I have of myself and my sisters as children growing up in a housing project. So just for identification purposes, that's me sitting in front of the television. And then my middle sister, Ronnie, I'm the baby, by the way, my middle sister, Ronnie, and then my cousin, who was like a sister to me, Sharon, has the roller in her head. And then my mentally disabled sister, Renee, right? So this is my mother. So my mother worked her entire life as a domestic worker in Greensboro, North Carolina. So she cooked, she cleaned, she ironed, she washed, and she took care of white children. So I must say that I was a little bit jealous of, because it was apparent that she loved the kids that she took care of or encountered basically on a weekly, if not 2 or 3 times a week basis. So in 2000 and 2007, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So instead of me being the grieving daughter, I decided to use this opportunity to photograph my mother during this process. This is my mother right after, this is her in hospice right after she died. And we stood around her bed and prayed for her ascension. So we, I had planned to put these faces in on these paintings, and then somebody, they were in the exhibition at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and people kept commenting and saying, I see my mother, I see my dad, I see my loved one, and that's us standing around the bed. So I decided to leave the faces blank. This is my sister, Renee. Renee is currently 61 years old, but has the mindset of a 3rd grader. And she also has epilepsy. So this painting was done in 1993. When I first started paintings, this is like one of the first full bodies of work that I did was of Renee. Started painting Renee. And the reason I painted Renee is because I felt like we were both in the margin. Me, because I was a Black woman artist, and the art world has always been white male. And for the most part remains that way today. And Renee, because she was mentally disabled and, had epilepsy. So I began to paint my sister basically as a metaphor for myself. And then I found in painting her that I started scratching out her face. And it scared me so bad. And it made me feel feel an incredible amount of guilt and sadness, because I really didn't know what was going on. So I just shut my studio door and called my teacher. That's what you do when you have these kind of problems. You call your teacher and say, what's going on? So she told me to get back in there. And, in hindsight, I realized that I was scratching Renee out because she was such a big person in our family, and still is, that she was casting a huge shadow over me. So you see me trying to merge this figure on the left, and Renee's head just slowly goes down. And in this painting, I'm still behind her. There's it's scratched in there, help me. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. But this is actually the last piece that I did in that work, in that series. It's called Can You Hear My Silent Scream? So, all right. So I grew up in the projects in Greensboro, and I went to Grimsley High School, and they had a clown club, and I decided to join it. Okay, love being a clown. So at the time, everybody, I went to school during desegregation. So Grimsley was predominantly, or is predominantly, a white school, high school. And so we had to wear white face paint. So I put on white face paint. I made myself a wig out of yarn, and I put on my grandma's pajamas. And then I stuffed my body with pillows so that I would stick out, right? And then Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus came to town, and they were doing tryouts. Okay. So I was like, I'm going to try out. This is my calling, right? This is what I want to be. And so you can see me in this picture with this bozo clown watching us. They would tell us to show us sadness, show us this, show us that. But we couldn't have our outfit, our disguise on. So I failed miserably at this, just with me, my face. Everything that I didn't recognize about joining for Barnum and Bailey Circus, at the time, they did not accept women. The clowns that were women were men dressed as women, and there was no Black people, right? Okay, who knew, right? Okay, bad choice. So then I went to a Duke performance at ADF, American Dance Festival, and I saw this performance of these people in blackface. And I went out the very next day and I bought an Afro wig and got me some blackface paint because I felt liberated. I could be a Black clown. You know, it never occurred to me that I could be a Black clown. And that's in part because they instilled in us in high school that you had to be white. And I hadn't seen any Black clowns. So what I did was I started painting stereotypes that are associated with being Black, like eating watermelon. This is called Molly with her favorite mammy. So this is back to the occupation of my mother as basically a caretaker for families, white families. So what happened, skip forward a little bit, what happened is that in 2022, I believe, 2003, okay, I met Jean Jordan and Steve Asher, and they were filmmakers. This is when I was at Harvard at the Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Studies. And they were like, we really like your work. We want to make a film. We want to make a movie out of it. We think your work looks like film stills. And so I thought, didn't really take it serious because I thought it was going to be more like a home movie. Oh, Jesus. So it was not a home movie. My painting, Embracing Renee, here we are hugging, is on the cover, and they made posters, and HBO, bought the film so that it's an HBO documentary, and it was nominated for an Emmy. I think it's Andy said. So, oh my God, I look like a crazy person in this film because they followed our family for 6 years. And because I was thinking it was nothing, I look crazy. Here's a clip. Here's a trailer from the film.
Tell me about Renee.
She makes pot holders. Renee was born mentally disabled. She's the mindset of a third grader.
Remove the pain, little one.
Appreciate your prayers, but it's fine if you can't come over.
She couldn't imagine she was not going to be here.
Our home would have been broken if that Negro had stayed. Excuse me for saying Negro so much. That's my usual vernacular.
I grew up in the projects in Greensboro, North Carolina. When I was 17, the Klan showed up with guns and killed 5 people right in front of our house. everybody knew that I had made this promise. So everybody was asking me, what are you going to do about Renee? Damn, I got to get that macaroni and cheese cooked. Before I go to work tomorrow, she won't have any lunch. Oh my God, my life as an artist has gone down the tubes. Kind of like me and Renee, like Renee said she wanted to get a boyfriend.
He has the master plan. Yeah. If you worried about something, stop it. Thank you, Lord.
I like it.
A promise is a promise. Wow. So that's Raising Renee, which is now, it's still an HBO documentary, but it's on Amazon Prime for free, in case you want to check it out. So after my mother passed and I inherited Renee, I made paintings because I was so desperately trying to be like my mother and fill my mother's void in Renee's life, which was useless and pointless, because I realized that I couldn't do that because I'm not my mother. And Renee's not my child. She's my sister. So I had to get over that. One of the great things that happened after my mother passed away was I started getting to know my dad, who also lives in Greensboro. And I couldn't, this is all in the film, so I'm not telling you any secrets because everybody knows this. But my mother had an affair with my dad, who was a taxi cab driver in Greensboro. And she was so hoping that he would rescue her and take her out of this bad marriage. But he just wasn't capable of doing that. And he still isn't. So because my mother raised me and, provided for me, my loyalty was with her. And so I just waited basically until after she died. And then I began to form this relationship with my father, which I still have today, right? So he's one of my big muses. I mean, I paint him often because he's getting old. We just celebrated his 95th birthday on March 25th. So here's my dad. And just so you could see, I mean, these paintings, my dad used to weigh like 300 and some pounds. And I've watched and recorded basically through painting over the years, him sort of just, shrink down, and this is him today. So this was taken on his birthday after we ate ribs together. Okay, so this is something that all you artists out there, that I must say you must have the courage to be open to opportunities and new experiences, right? And this is easier said than done because it comes and goes with me. So I guess it's been 3 years now, right? About 2.5 years ago, I got the American Academy in Rome Fellowship. And I wasn't expecting to get it because it's very competitive, and I just never thought. I mean, I don't speak Italian. And so anyway, I get this prize, and it's like, you're going to Rome for a year to live. And I was like completely depressed about the thought of being in Europe for a year without knowing the language. And every residency that I've attended, I've been the only Black person. So I was like, oh God, I'm gonna be so isolated. It's gonna be, and I just had good friends around me to say, girl, get your butt on that plane. So I did. And my first month there, I was depressed. So, I just let myself be depressed. And you can see the clocks appearing in the background that don't make any sense, because I was like I was in a time, I was like I was in a bubble of Italian luxury, and just really had difficulty fitting, but I survived it. And then when it was time to go, I didn't want to go home. So anyway, one of the things that I had to deal with was Wednesday was always vegetarian Wednesday, right? And they would serve something like this. And I would be like, what is it? Right. And they'd have some fancy Italian name that I couldn't read. I'm like, oh my God. So me and my friends, we started going and eating pizza before Vegetarian Wednesday, so that when we got to Vegetarian Wednesday, we'd be like, oh yeah, we can eat that, because we were so full on pizza. So it worked out. And then finally I set up my palette and I started painting. We had fresh fruit every single day. And I started painting what I saw, what was around me. And depending on what was in season, because, everything was grown out back. So we had apple trees, lemon trees, it was all kinds of trees. The Academy had a huge garden. And so whatever was in season is what we would end up on the table. So these characters are guys that I packed from home and brought with me to Italy, because I wanted to incorporate them in my paintings. And I made a painting of my dad. I made several paintings of my dad because I missed him. And I also made paintings of my cousin sister, Sharon, who had the roller in her hair in the first picture. So Sharon died of diabetes. And I made these paintings entitled Sharon Pushing Up Daisies, to talk about that. And then while I was in Italy, Sharon's brother died of diabetes also, because he wasn't interested in amputating his foot. So my cousin sent me a photograph of him right after he passed, and I inserted these tulips, which are some of my favorite flowers, onto him and made this painting. So, okay. So then I was like, okay, it's time to enjoy Italy. And so I started looking around, and I had always had these negative thoughts about hanging clothes on a line, right? Because that's what we did in the projects. Everybody else had dryers, or, they dried their clothes inside, but my mother and my sister insisted on going outside and hanging out the clothes. And I thought it was a sign of poverty. Not in Italy. Women like stroll their clothes out, and they're very proud of hanging them out there. And it just they started looking like little, crystal installations, right? So it really helped change my idea about clotheslines. And so then I started taking pictures of clotheslines and then painting them with the renewed spirit that it had really nothing. It was it's an artistry, for a housewife or whoever is doing the laundry, and something to be honored, not to be shamed of. So this is my studio in Rome. There's my little prisoner that I brought from North Carolina. And then I was doing auction stuff. So I was bidded on this marionette from Germany. And because it's all in Europe, it was real easy to like ship it to me. And they did. And then I put my prisoner on it. And first she sat on it. And then I made this painting of his ascension and like freeing himself from the prison. Wine, I already talked about that because we had lots of it. It was really great. They provided like 2 bottles of wine per 4 people at the dinner table, all the way down the dinner table. So it was like 50 of us, right? So there's always a group that didn't really drink all their wine. We helped. So after dinner, we would go to the bar, this is what the bar would look like. Have anything that you want. You could get, I had a lot of amaretto there, and the wall behind the bar was the sea of white males, i.e. former fellows of the American Academy in Rome. So I was like, where's the Black people on this wall? Like, we don't have any Black fellows that have come to Rome. And where are the women, right? There's no women up there either. So I was asked to create, the year that I was at the Academy, there were actually 5 African Americans and 23 women, which were both record breaking for the Academy. And so they asked me if I would paint my fellows, and so I did. So now we permanently exist in the bar in Rome, still surrounded by a sea of white males. The other thing that happened is that I did this collaboration with this Italian artist by the name of Gaetano. And so he gave me this, like, this painting is like 7 feet tall, right? And he painted this bust and he said, you know, you finish it. I was like, oh geez, I was so afraid I was gonna mess it up. So I put my little doll, Molly, down there, excuse me, Gracie. I put her in front of the painting and then I painted her in. And then I tried these different heads on this mannequin to figure out how am I gonna make this work? So finally, slowly but surely, I was able to make it into a painting. And I don't know if you know 21C hotels. There's one here in Durham, but they're all over the country. And the owners of 21C purchased this painting. And so you'll see it floating around in their collection. Okay, still trying to be open. So, you know, it seems like just when I get my footing and I get comfortable, it's like, no, we need a new adventure. And so the American Dance Festival a couple of years ago said, I want you to meet Eiko from Eiko and Coma, the dancers, Japanese dancers. So I was like, well, and they said, I want American Dance Festival, we want you to collaborate with them. And I was like, oh, I can't dance. So, I mean, I'm not interested, right? And they're like, no, you got to meet her. So the director was like, you know, you guys have a lot in common. I thought, oh, Jesus. So anyway, I met Eiko and we hit it off and she said, let's collaborate. So she was at the time caring for her mother, who's 94 and living in Japan. So, and Eiko was in New York City, but she would go like 4 times a year back to visit her mother. And so I thought the whole caretaking thing, me taking care of Renee, that, you know, we could collaborate on the idea of caretaking. So I said, well, I really want to come to Japan and meet your mother, right? And so that was like in January. That was like in December. We made those plans. And in January, she called me and she said, if you want to meet my mother, you need to come immediately because she's dying. So I dropped everything, including school. And Duke was very generous with letting me do that because they just like, you got to go. This is important. And I couldn't even explain why it was, I couldn't articulate why it was important. It was just like I needed to go. So I took a 23-hour plane ride to Tokyo. And then her assistant met me at the airport. And then we had to take a 2-hour bus, like a Greyhound bus ride to where Eiko was. So it was, I didn't know what day it was. The good news is that I was showered with sake and sushi. So lots of delicious food, right? So one of the things that happened or didn't happen in Japan is that Japan didn't colonize any Black people, brown people, I should say. Instead, they colonized other Asians. So there were no Black people anywhere. And so every time I walked past the window or was sitting in a restaurant, people were staring because they had never seen a Black person. And this little kid was like, I just need to touch you. So I let him, why not? But the other duty that I had, the main duty I had was that this is the room. This was actually the bedroom in Aiko's house. And in that little box there was her mother, right? There she is. So Aiko every day would say something like, go in and talk to my mother. I'd be like, oh, Jesus, what am I going to say to her? She's dead, right? And they had these oranges and things out for her. And, she was, I go in, light a candle, an incense, excuse me, and, just sit and talk to her mother. So her mother, was lying there looking gorgeous, right? She's not embalmed at all, but you could see her starting to decay, like around her neck and on her fingers and stuff. But she had this beautiful, Japanese dressing on. And she was just pretty gorgeous, right? To be dead, she was pretty gorgeous. And part of the problem was the crematory was so full that she had to stay in the house for 7 or 8 days before there was an opening for her to be cremated. And so what the funeral home would come and ice pack. You can see some white on her fingers. That's because they're probably frozen, but they would ice pack this box that she was lying in to preserve her, basically. So, and then finally, 7, 8 days later, the neighbors came out and we took her body to a little Buddhist chapel, and we said this whole ritual. So the reason that I have this looking down at my feet is because obviously I wasn't planning on going to a funeral, and I wasn't dressed properly, so this is me. And so then what happened was the Buddhist priest chanted for a good 50 minutes to an hour. And this is how it sounded. Just a little clip. So that kept going on for an hour. And I remember coming back to Duke and telling my students this story, and they said, why didn't you just run? You could have run away. And I was like, and go where? I couldn't speak the language. Where was I going to be running to? So anyway, here is Aiko's husband, Koma, and Aiko's son. And the same box that she was in at Aiko's home, they just rolled it right in. And then what they did was the family members broke off pieces of all the flowers that were sent, and they filled it up, with flowers all around her, which I was just like, this is so gorgeous. Oh my God, this is like, so yeah, in the family. So then, they're all sad, of course. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in Japan or China or North Carolina, it doesn't matter. Grief looks the same way. Losing a loved one, it looks the same, right? So, this is finally, we have to go to another spot for the crematory. And this is the guy rolling the body in, right? And basically what they do is like, they were this like, they look kind of like kilns, but like in a storage unit, right? So it was like 10 furnaces right beside each other. And they were extremely busy. So they like rolled the body in, the woman hits the button, we go upstairs and drink sake for 45 minutes. We come back, there, and we have to go through this other ritual where we actually, all the family members put the bones in this urn, and you have to make sure So the guy that's in charge is saying, this is the femur, this is he's like naming all the bones. And the reason that he was doing that is because he didn't want us to stand her on her head, right? It was important that she be upright so that she would be upright in the next life. So here's me holding her bones. I mean, this is the most intense visit I have ever had, I must say. And afterwards we had a lovely dinner, and then when we were leaving the restaurant, it was actually snowing, which was so bizarre, because it wasn't that cold, and it was rare that it actually snows um, in this part of Japan. So anyway, more sushi, and then here's Aiko. After we packed up her mother's apartment, I got on a bus to go 2 hours back to Tokyo. And here's Aiko on the side of the waving at me as I leave on the bus. So I came back and I was like, oh my God, what was that? What kind of experience was that? Oh my God. And I just started painting. And I made these paintings of me and Aiko together. And the American Dance Festival made that painting into posters. And then I started painting her mother, right? Aiko had sent me this image of her mother right before she died. And so I just tried to paint fragility, tried to paint everything that I was seeing or that I had absorbed in the presence of her mother. So one of the things Aiko really wanted, Aiko's an only child, by the way. So she was really glad that I was there because I had to help her clean her mother out of this basically nursing home that she was in. And she said, I want you to take something of my mother's. And I was like, girl, your mother's a size 0. I can't wear anything that your mother had. But I found this chemise and I took it, not because I was going to wear it, but because I thought it would make a nice painting or something. And it was beautiful. So at the American Dance Festival, that summer, Aiko wore the chemise and danced with my painting of the chemise. So I made this painting. I inflated some of this. I put more flowers. Her head was actually down at the other end of the casket, but I just made it larger than it actually was. And then the performance, we had the paintings on the stage, and one of the dancers performed to one of my blackface clown paintings. He sang a cappella to it. So here I am in my studio with my work. So, okay. So this is a beautiful quote that I found at the beginning of COVID that says, we will not go back to normal because the normal never was. And it says our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity in nature. So that's by a poet by the name of Sonia Renee Taylor. And I was like, yes, that's it. So during COVID, I was at home and I took advantage of that time. I was like, thank you, God, for COVID. I get to stay at home and paint, And so I made these paintings just about how I was feeling. And it started with just a scarf around my head. And people think this is those are I have sunglasses, but it's just this pattern of the scarf wrapped around my head. And it just happened to fall in place like that. So, and then one day, my intuition, my voice was like getting really large in my head and said, you should buy some rope. I was like, I don't need any rope. And they said, no, you should buy some rope. Like, check it out on Amazon. I was like, I ain't buying no rope. And I just kept saying, and then I looked on Amazon to see how much rope costs. And it was, it was affordable. That's how, if it had been $100, I would have been, I ain't buying no rope. But I bought it because it was like $35. And I made these paintings with the rope wrapped around my head. I didn't even know what I was going to do with the rope. It came, I wrapped it around my head. It fell the way it did magically. And these paintings came out of it, right? And the interesting thing about this is that white people saw the rope as an extension of my dreadlocks, because my dreadlocks were fairly long at that time. And Black people saw it as a noose or a lynching, right? It's consistent right down the line, which I thought was really interesting. So, and I got my friend Kim to pose with me with the rope. And this sort of repetitive thing, that I had actually started in Italy was just resurfacing, right? And then I became, this was like, George Floyd, right at the height of that, and People for the American Way. Everybody was saying Black Lives Matter, and I found this fabric. I actually made this painting in Italy, but it had a big white open box that I was like, I don't know what will go in there. And so 3 years later, this Black Lives Matter fit perfectly in there, right? So sometimes you got to wait on the painting to tell you what's next. So People for the American Way asked me to participate in Enough of Trump campaign. And so I got my cousin to pose, and I made these paintings around enough of Trump, or enough is enough, and Black Lives Matter. And People for the American Way turned them into billboards and put them up in swing states. So this was like Wisconsin. This is another painting that I did, Enough, which was everywhere. It was in Atlanta. I think this is Detroit, Michigan. So it was like, the work just started showing up all over the place, right? Which was really powerful. And ironically, in each one of those states where my artwork hung, they went blue in November. So, which was really made me think about the power of art, right? So that was my little political vibe. And then lastly, I think about leaving a legacy, right? That's really COVID just sort of brought that to me without a doubt. And I was like, I got to do more. I got to leave a legacy. I got to do more than just teach in academia. And so what I did was I bought 11 acres of land in Chapel Hill, and building my house, and there it is, and a studio. So I'm putting together an artist in residence program for people of color and women, right? And it's so that I don't ever have to feel that loneliness of being the only Black one, or at a regular residency, or like be looking at the food like, what in the world is this? Just having to give up culturally so many things. So the residency will be for 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on the individual. I'll accept 5 people a year, and they will come and they will get a stipend, and it's non-for-profit. They'll get a stipend, and they will get a studio space and a place to live. So that is hopefully will be my legacy. The name of my residency is called Rennie's Place, and I hope to get it open next year. Inside, I mean, it's just, I can't believe this is happening. I mean, I still go out there and I'm like, is this really mine? Thank you.